There we go. Yeah, I see some people still jumping in. Good. I love to see the participant number rising.
Oh, I don't actually get to see the participants?
No, since it's a webinar.
Oh,
I know.
I always like to see
But the chat
people.
function is working.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward when there's no other faces. All right. We're live on YouTube now. We've waited a few seconds, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully people that jump in later can catch on. But all right. Hello, everybody. I'm Elisa, and I'm the events coordinator at Politics and Prose Bookstore, and I would like to welcome you to PNP Live. Thank you so much for joining us in this virtual format today. At any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat that I'll be posting to purchase the Perfumist of Paris on the Politics and Prose website. That's a lot of P's. Additionally, you can ask Alka any questions by clicking on the Q&A button, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. So while we'll try to get to everybody's questions, we do apologize in advance if we don't have time to address yours, but hopefully we'll get to them. We're also providing closed captions if you click on the CC link, which is also at the bottom of the screen next to the Q&A box. And finally, we want to thank you for being here with us today. We're so thankful to our family of loyal customers for keeping our business and our spirits afloat. And now I'd like to welcome to PNP Live, Alka Joshi, celebrating the release of her book, The Perfumist of Paris, which is the final book in the Jaipur trilogy. Many of you are familiar with The Henna Artist, which is now translated into 29 different languages. So we are very excited for the conclusion of this very amazing trilogy. Born in India and raised in the US since she was 9, Alka Joshi has a BA from Stanford University and an MFA from California College of Arts. Joshi's debut novel, The Henna Artist, immediately became a New York Times bestseller and a Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick, and was also longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and is currently in development as a TV series. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alka Joshi to PNP Live.
Thank you so much. This is so great. And thanks to Politics and Prose for having me. I never intended to write a trilogy. This really happened organically. People always ask me, did you plan on this? So the very first book, The Henna Artist, started with an idea that I had about creating a different life for my mother, a very independent life, much more independent than she had been allowed in her very traditional Indian family and Indian marriage. And so Lakshmi had this amazing opportunity to invent herself as a henna artist and an herbal healer. So that's how the whole trilogy started. So Lakshmi is doing all this fabulous stuff, and we come to the end of that first book, and it's really about Lakshmi going off to the Himalayas to start a new life, primarily working with Dr. Kumar and healing people. Well, then at that point, Malik, who is an 8-year-old helper of Lakshmi's in the Henna Artist, he just started bugging me. And he said, now you've got to write my story. And the reason that he was saying that is because so much of what I wrote in the Henna Artist was cut out. It was cut out by my agent, by my editors, everybody who said, you really need to tighten this so that the first book is really about Lakshmi. Okay, that's fine. I did that, but then Malik would not be silenced. And he said, so much of what you cut out were really my scenes. And the Malik who was talking to me, I realized, was 20 years old. He's 20 years old. He's an adult. He has gone through the whole boarding school at Shimla, courtesy of Samir Singh. And he has a voice now. He has an outward bearing that belies his street kid savvy. And so I ended up writing that book. And then when we were finished with it, it was the year 1969. And now Radha is asking me to make sure that her story gets told. I just realized that readers were definitely going to ask me again and again, where was Radha in all of this? Whatever happened to that very rebellious 13-year-old sister that Lakshmi had? Well, Radha spent so much of her time in the henna artist making life really difficult for Lakshmi. But in 1974, what is she doing in Paris? Well, she ended up eloping with a Parisian who was trekking through the Himalayas. She was only 18 and graduating from her fancy boarding school. And he was smitten with her, and they fell in love, and then they went back to Paris, which is where he was from. Now, in 1974, Radha is a young woman with 2 children, and her husband is Pierre Fontaine. They live in the 6th arrondissement of Paris. And because Radha had been so good at mixing Lakshmi's paste, in fact, even Lakshmi would say that Radha mixed that paste finer and silkier than anything she could have done. And so because Radha did that, I thought she's going to go into a profession, I think, because she is ambitious. She's very ambitious. She's going to go into a profession where she is mixing ingredients and coming out with something fabulous at the other end. And I thought, what better industry for her to go into in Paris than perfume? So she finds her way into that industry, and she is lucky enough to have a female boss. Now, at that time in the 1970s, the perfume industry was very male dominated. You would think that all the people creating perfume would have been women, but no, it was essentially men creating perfume for women. And there was one or two very outstanding female perfumers at that time. One of them was Sophia Grossman, and that is whom I used as my template for Radha's boss, Delphine Silberman. And Radha is being groomed by Delphine to become a master perfumer. In order to create her very first signature fragrance, Radha needs to really show that she understands how to mix all these ingredients and do something phenomenal. So she sets out to India. She meets up with Lakshmi, and they go to the houses of the courtesans. This is Lakshmi's idea, because Lakshmi said, the same women who taught me the art of henna and seduction using henna are the women who are going to be able to tell you how to seduce through scent. This is really all that they do. And so the sisters go down to Agra, which is where the courtesans are, and they spend time there. And sure enough, Radha has an opportunity to see how fragrances are made in India. It's a much more primitive environment than she's used to in Paris. In Paris, you have these sterile labs. Everybody wears these white lab coats. They have cement floors. But in India, there's an earthen floor. The fragrance factory is open to the heavens, and the men working in the factory are, wearing their dhotis or their bush shirts, or actually nothing on top because it's hot in the work that they're doing. So in realizing all the differences in the way that fragrances are created, there is this wonderful passage I kind of want to read to you. And this is when Radha discovers for the first time this particular fragrance factory that the courtesan has taken her to. The courtesan's name is Hazi, and she is the head courtesan. She is very, she's loath to give away all of their secrets, but for Lakshmi, she will do anything, because they really feel like they've raised Lakshmi from 17 years old, and Lakshmi has their heart, so that when Lakshmi says, you really need to help Radha find a fragrance or an ingredient that she doesn't have currently, they say, okay, we'll be happy to help you. I am looking, here we go. Suddenly, the door to the back alley opens and a man walks through it, pushing a wheelbarrow filled with cow pats. He upends the lot in a corner of the room next to a larger mound of similar cow patties. Just as I'm about to turn my attention back to the essential oil, I see two of the workers using large buckets to scoop the cow dung into the copper vessels. The worker at the hearth stands and places both of his hands on the metal pot. He seems to be testing the temperature of the water inside the vessel with his hands. In class, the workers would be using a temperature gauge. I watch, fascinated, wondering why they're cooking manure. As if she's read my thoughts, Hazi says, it's not cow dung, it's soil collected after the first monsoon rains. Patties made of soil? I walk over to the pail of essential oil and tap the worker on the shoulder. He steps aside to let me sniff. Oh my gosh, suddenly I'm back in Agra, 7 years old, my hair hanging in a messy braid down my back. The monsoons have come and left the earth bleeding water. I'm stepping out into the open area in the back of our hut to look at the sky. Patches of blue fight for space amidst pregnant clouds. On the ground in front of me, the 3 metal pails I'd left out overnight are filled with rainwater, which means I won't have to fetch water from the farmer's well for several days. Steam rises from the ground. The air is dense with potential and possibility. I spin in a circle, let the drops wash over me. What Ma and I could do before the sun bakes the soil. We could grow. We could wash the clothes today and hang to dry to use this energy, this possibility of making something new. Ma is behind me, kneading dough for the chapatis. Her eyes haven't clouded over yet. The scent of atta merges with the scent of my surroundings, creating something moist and sugary, an earthy fragrance. Hazi is grinning at my reaction. This, Radha, is the scent of rain. So that is the essential ingredient that Radha is able to bring back to Paris. And as she does that, she enters her apartment. Her husband, Pierre, is sitting on the couch, and next to him is the baby that she gave up for adoption 17 years ago. He has now grown into a young man, and his name is Nikki. And he is looking for some answers from his birth mother. So, of course, Radha never told Pierre that she had a baby when she was 13 going on 14. And this will be a reckoning for her to make amends for some of the havoc that she wreaked when she was 13. I think it's going to be a really interesting read for a lot of people, not only because we're going to learn a lot about perfume, but because Radha is going to undergo some sort of a struggle between the work that she loves in the perfume industry and her home life, where her husband, remember this is 1974, men are not as enlightened then as they are now. He wants her to stay at home. He feels it is beneath them to have a wife working outside the home when there's no need for anybody to do that. He makes enough money as an architect. So this for me, the Perfumist of Paris is a way to, first of all, wrap up the trilogy. First we have Lakshmi, then we have Malik, and now we have Radha, the 3 main characters of this story over a 19-year span. And it's a great way to sort of, have everybody come to terms with all of the struggles that they have been dealing with and, how they come to a conclusion about it. I think that I also wanted to create something like this for Radha because I have a lot of female friends, young and old, who have struggled with this issue. They love their careers. They're ambitious women, and they also wanted to be mothers. So they are mothers. And what that creates at home is an imbalance, because they're not only expected to work outside the home, but they are also expected to do most of the chores at home. And in 1974, that meant that Radha actually has 2 full-time jobs. Her husband is not all bad. He often will create the dinners at home, but the emotional baggage of caring for her whole family is really on Radha. And I think I would like for book clubs, as they discuss this book, to ask how far have we come in the last 50 years since Radha was struggling with this issue? I think the answers will be very telling, and I think that they will make for a really good conversation. I am always, with each of my books, always about female empowerment. It's always about how we can get women to have more agency and what happens to women when they don't have agency. So for me, these are books that are very central to my life, to the lives of my friends, and I think to women in general around the world. One thing that, hang on just a second, I'm going to turn down the heat. I've got a little heater going here. So one thing that I had to do in order to create this particular novel is I had to learn about perfume. Perfume has always intimidated me. Like when you go to a department store and the women at the perfume counter are always trying to spritz you or trying to have you, sniff their blotters. I don't want to do it. I feel that I'm overwhelmed by perfume scents, and I don't know what's the right scent for me. And I don't want somebody to sort of push a scent on me that I'm sort of not ready for. So in doing the research for this book, I had to actually learn about perfume and sort of get over my intimidation, and I did. And what happened is that I was talking to the producer of the Henna Artist TV series, and I said, I really need to learn about perfume. He said, oh, well, then you need to talk to my friend Anne Gottlieb in New York City. She is the diva behind scents such as J'adore and CK1 and Eternity. She is, really well known in the perfume industry. So I got a hold of her. She said, come on out to New York City. So I flew out there. I live in California. I flew out there, and she was very gracious, very generous with her time. We first spent time in her atelier, and then we went for lunch with one of her master perfumer friends, who was very forthcoming with all of his information. And then she made it possible for me to go into one of these large fragrance labs. I didn't know anything about how the labs work, but now I was able to see how each lab assistant has their own little perfume organ, and they can order scents that are in some kind of a warehouse, some like safe deposit box somewhere, and they're working with 300 to 400 scents daily. And then of course there are the special scents that they will have to order from the storerooms. And then after I had done that, the master perfumers that I had a chance to talk to, they said, you're going to have to go to France and talk to the master perfumers there, because they also know a lot about scents, and it could be very different from what we do here in New York City. So I flew to Paris and I met with master perfumers there, and they said, you need to go to Grasse in the southeastern part of France. Grasse used to be known as a perfume capital of the world. What happened is that European traders in the earlier centuries, as they went to the Indian subcontinent, they would source all these ingredients like tuberose and vetiver and cloves and cinnamon and sandalwood, all these things that go into fragrances. They would source those ingredients, and then they would go back to Europe and sell them to fragrance houses. Well, it became very expensive for fragrance houses to buy this way. So what they said to the traders is, why don't you bring back a root of this and a root of that? We will try to grow it here in Grasse, which is a very temperate climate, maybe closer to the Indian subcontinent. So that's how Grasse became a perfume capital. They started growing lavender and tuberose and jasmine and all of these kinds of things. And it made it more accessible for the fragrance companies there to start using those ingredients. So I talked to the folks at Grasse, where there's a lot of bottling that gets done and a lot of compounding that gets done. So then those people said, you need to go to Lisbon. And in Lisbon, I met with one young boutique perfumer. She is creating some fabulous scents out of India. And then I met with this wonderful gentleman. He's 85 years old. He was recommended to me as an interview by one of the other people that I spoke to in New York City, Paul Austin. And so this gentleman in Lisbon, he actually lives in the south of Portugal. And when I initially approached him, he said, well, let me check out your books and see if I want to talk to you. And then he wrote an email to me back and he said, okay, I have checked out the books. I really like your writing. You're a serious writer. I will talk to you. So he flew up to Lisbon and we spent a very happy 4 hours chatting over lunch. And he told me a lot about what was happening in the perfume industry in the 1970s. He had been involved in the industry for 70 years of his life because his entire family had been owning perfume factories for centuries. So he was a really interesting gentleman and knew a lot about what was happening in Paris. So I used many of his stories. They're very charming stories, and they're also a little hedonistic. So I used those stories in the book. And then when I got back, I was able to sort of synthesize everything that I had learned. It turns out that master perfumers absorb and are able to memorize 3,000 scents in their nose, 3,000 scents. And that means that when they design a perfume, the formula they're coming up with is happening in their brain. So they're actually just having a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, and they're writing down, let's see, I think I need 0.01 grams of the sandalwood oil. And then if I mix that with 0.3 grams of the tuberose and 0.006 of the cinnamon. And so this is how they're doing it all in their heads. And that is how they formulate perfume. Then they send that formula down to the lab. And that's where lab assistants like Radha in the Perfumist of Paris are mixing, blending that formula, sending it back to the master perfumer. So the perfumer can figure out whether the blend smells like what they thought it was going to smell like in their head. I just find this completely fascinating. I know that in this country, we refer to perfumers as the nose, but actually the French don't like that term. They refer to the term le nez, which does mean the nose, but they don't call themselves the nose for that reason. Le nez is really just a way of saying that they're using their nose to discern various odors and aromas. So anyway, don't ever call one of those French perfumers a nose. They won't appreciate it. The other thing that I found is that it takes about 10 years for somebody to become a master perfumer. That's a lot of sniffing. That's a lot of work in the lab, trying to get the right scents put together for the master perfumer. And it also requires a lot of chemistry. Most master perfumers have a degree in chemistry, either a bachelor's and a master's or just one. They are very serious about their work, but they're also some of the happiest people I have ever met. And I wanted to communicate some of that in the Perfumist of Paris. So in 1974, in the lab, while Radha is working, one of her co-lab assistants is coming in, having been at a nightclub the night before, and he is whistling "Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir?" So, you know, I think that many of the people whom I met doing my research, bits and pieces of them have made their way into the book in different characters. I loved putting this book together because I think that there is something very mysterious about perfume. What really triggers us to remember certain things in our lives or remember what we loved about a certain person? What is it that happens when we absorb a smell or an odor or an aroma, what is actually happening in our memory, in our brain. It's fascinating, and it is kind of mysterious. So I learned a lot of that, and it was super, super fun. I would love to entertain any questions that you might have about the whole trilogy, or even about this particular novel. One thing I want to say to you is you can buy the hardcover, but I would also encourage you at the same time to do what a lot of my readers do, which is to read the hardcover at the same time that they're listening to the audiobook. And what that does is it tells you how words are pronounced, so that rather than struggling with it in the book, you keep thinking, oh, Lene, or is it Lanez, or what is this word? You can actually hear the narrator say that. And I was lucky enough with the first book, The Henna Artist, to choose my narrators. I don't think it's something that most authors do, but my background is in advertising. And so for all of the TV commercials and radio commercials, we have to cast the characters. And I am used to listening to a lot of audition tapes to find the right person. So in The Henna Artist, the publisher sent me a tape of 5 different narrators, 5 women who are reading a passage of Lakshmi's from the book. And I didn't hear my Lakshmi. I didn't hear the voice in my head. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to go with an audio narrator who doesn't sound like Lakshmi. That's just going to be terrible. And so I thought, well, rather than bother Harper Audio with it, I will try to look for the narrator myself. And I did. I went on Audible, where you can listen to the first 5 minutes of almost any soundtrack. And I listened to all of the books by Indian authors. And I found her, Sneha Mathan, it was her name. And then I went back to Harper Audio and I said, look, I know I'm a debut author. I don't want to be a diva or anything, but could you please have Sneha read that same passage? And they did. And then they sent me the MP4 file, and she was absolutely perfect. And I said to my husband, will you listen to this? So he did. And he goes, oh my God, that is absolutely Lakshmi. So Sneha then read all of the Harper, the Henna Artist, because that is all Lakshmi's voice, right? And she did a beautiful job, even down to the talking parakeet and the 2 Maharanis. I mean, she did a beautiful job. She even took us to the top of the New York Times bestseller list for audiobooks for The Henna Artist. Now, when it came to The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, the second book in the trilogy, I hired Sneha again to do the Lakshmi portion, but then I also got to choose the woman who did Nimmi, and then the parts of Malik were done by this young man whom I thought really embodied Malik's character. So then it comes down to the third book, and in The Perfumist of Paris, I thought I want to bring Sneha back because she did Radha and Lakshmi in the first book, so she really understands Radha as well. So now she is narrating once again for the entire book, The Perfumist of Paris, and she did a beautiful job. So all my readers who have already zipped through this book, I mean, it was just released last week and they finished it in 1 or 2 days. And they are also now listening to the audiobook, which I think is a great way to go. There's also an ebook. Some people don't want to take along the heavy book because they're traveling, and an ebook is probably the best solution for that. So, yes. So do we have any questions?
All right, it looks like we have some questions coming in. For anybody who's having trouble finding the Q&A box, it should be at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and it'll say Q&A and have like 2 little chat boxes as the icon. So hopefully you can find them there, but I'm also taking a look at the webinar chat. So if for some reason anybody's having trouble, I'll look at the questions there as well. All right. So the first one is from an anonymous attendee who asks, you said that the character of Lakshmi was inspired by your mother. Are there any other characters in the Jaipur trilogy inspired by people that you know in real life?
A little bit. The character of Malik is kind of inspired by my younger brother, who is very much an entrepreneur, very loyal to the family. He will do anything for the family. And I think that's what Malik is all about. So that kind of loyalty that comes from, it's inspired by my younger brother. And my younger brother is also very likable, just like Malik is very likable. And I think that the character of Radha, I don't have a sister, but I do understand, because I have two brothers, I understand sibling relationships. And I know that it's possible to love and hate your sibling at the same time. I think that, if push comes to shove, you would do anything for your brother or sister, but you can really get into it with them too, because they're going to love you at the end, regardless of how upset you get with them. So Radha is sort of inspired by my sibling relationships, but I don't know anyone in particular like Radha. As I said, Radha's boss here is inspired by Sophia Grossman, the master perfumer from the 70s and 80s. Pierre is nobody I know, but there is a character that I really fell in love with in The Perfumist of Paris, and that is Florence. Florence is the mother-in-law of Radha. She is Pierre's mother. And what was interesting to me is her trajectory took me by surprise. She is not accepting of Radha as a daughter-in-law. First of all, because she's Indian, she's not French. And secondly, she's not Catholic. And Florence really wants her granddaughters to be raised in a Catholic school. Radha has some very clear ideas about having her kids be in an international school, because she wants them to choose for themselves what kind of religion they might want in the future. And I think this happens with a lot of Hindu families, because Hinduism is a religion that doesn't have just one God. It's, polytheistic. Hinduism is also very accepting of all kinds of other religions. India has always been a refuge for lots of people escaping religious persecution. We have a lot of Jews in India. We have Christians. We have Muslims. We have, Sikhs and Zoroastrians and all kinds of folks. And so Radha is a product of that Hindu culture, and she doesn't feel that she wants her kids to be raised in just one religion, and wants them to choose for themselves in a way that my father and mother were doing that for us as well.
The next question is kind of similar to that one. Surabi asks, can you talk about how you develop your fictional characters?
Wow. This is so interesting. It's such an interesting question, Surabi, because I'm not sure I'm really conscious of it. It's not like I set out to create Radha in a certain way, or create Nikki, the boy, in a certain way, or create, Florence in a certain way. They show up. So the way my process works is so different from other authors that I've ever met. In my mind, what happens is that I have a central scene that shows up. And that scene has characters in it, and it has a setting. And I'm very clear about whether we're in a room or whether we're outside in a park. I see it immediately as, two people who are actually in conflict with one another, or maybe they are harmonious. I can sense the mood in the room, essentially. And then they're doing something. There's usually an action involved. So in The Perfumist of Paris, my first scene was actually Radha in the lab, and she is making the final adjustments to a blend that she is supposed to put together for her boss. And she realizes suddenly that the blend has changed from the evening before when she was first formulating it. And now what does she do? Because her boss is about to walk through the lab and ask, where is that blend? I really need it because I have to go into a meeting. So that scene came to me. The lab is completely clear in my mind, exactly what it looks like. And I can see her boss coming into the room from the glass windows that are the interior hallway. And I can hear the tap, tap, tap of the boss's high heels. And I can, pretty much picture that Radha is getting a little sweaty on the forehead, trying to figure out, how is she going to explain the fact that the formula she blended is not the same formula that she left overnight. So that is the first scene that came to me. And so from that, I know that Radha works in the lab. I know the other two people that are in the lab there. I can see them. I can just see, the older gentleman is here and then the younger gentleman is over there. And it's a small lab because the labs are small. And so, excuse me, I have a cold. And so it's that character, that the characters that from there on are going to develop themselves, because that one scene is going to lead to another scene, and that scene will just come to me. It will just come to me, and I will have that scene to work on, and then I'll have the next scene to work on. It's chronological. And then what I do is I thread these scenes together. And in between, I'm going to have some kind of a transition scene that I will need. So then I will find that transition scene and make it all string into string it all into a necklace. That's kind of how my process works. I never, ever do the thing that some authors do, which is they create a character Bible from the very beginning. I do not do that because I want my characters to change over time. That's the interesting thing about characters, is that they do change. And I want to sort of explore that at the same time that the reader is exploring it. What is that fundamental change that's happening to them? I want to be as surprised as the reader is. And if I already know everything that's going to happen, I won't be able to write it in a way that is interesting to the reader, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You do know that every character has to have some kind of an arc. You cannot forget a certain character. So if I started a scene with the 3 or 4 characters, I need to make sure that we know what happens to them throughout the novel. When I first started out writing, and it took me 10 years to write The Henna Artist before it would go into publication. But during all of those years, what I was learning is what not to do. And one of the things that I had a hard time remembering is you can't just forget a character when you introduce them in scene 2, and all of a sudden you're all the way to scene 7 and we don't know what's happened to that character. So one of the things we have to learn is to follow a character arc all throughout the book. And you cannot just leave anybody hanging. And then the second thing that has to happen is your characters have to change. There has to be something that happens to them throughout the novel. Every single character needs to go through some kind of maybe an epiphany. Maybe it's a change in the way that they handle conflict. Maybe it's a change in the way that they react to a certain other person in the room. But there has to be some kind of a change with each of the characters. And that's fun. I love that part. I love trying to figure out, hey, what's going to happen with this person? How are they going to change?
Absolutely. The next question is from another anonymous attendee. And it's clear you did a lot of extensive research on the process and the chemistry behind making perfumes. But this question is asking about the research that went into the book. As you grew up in the US since the age of 9, how were you able to write about the experience of Indian women in the 1900s?
I get asked this question a lot, and it's kind of interesting because let's say that you grew up in El Paso, Texas, right, for the first 9 years of your life. and then you move to the Bay Area. Can you really expunge the first 9 years of your life? Will you forget everything in the first 9 years of your life? No, it is hardwired into you. Those memories of those first 9 years of your life are going to stay with you, and you will be able to recall them. Maybe you are talking to your mother about something and you go, oh, right, Mom, I know we used to do that. We used to eat those things, and in the summertime and blah, blah, blah. The memories will just come up. So that's what I have to say to you, is that I'm not going to forget the first 9 years of my life. And then I have been to India many times with my mother. And when you go with your mother, she's going to tell you about her India. Things that my mother told me are, there's that fruit. It's called bale. We cannot get it in the United States. And I love it when I can come to India and find that it's in season. Okay, I learned about something that, I didn't know before, but now I'm learning it through my mother. My mother takes me to the sari bazaar, and she shows me those saris, which have these little mirrors on them. They're kind of like tiny little mirrors sewn in, and tourists are very attracted to those because they've never seen anything like it. My mother said to me, honey, those are for village people and tourists. They are not for us. Do not ever buy one of these. I mean, those are things I learned from my mother. And I remember watching my mother as a little girl threading the jasmine garland through her hair, through her braid. So that's what Lakshmi does. And I remember my mother and many of her friends, having the henna tattooed on their hands, on their legs, on their arms. And of course, every bride has really a major piece of henna done all over their bodies. So I remember asking my mom as a kid, Mom, can I have that too? So she would have the henna artist, do a little piece on my hands as well. I wanted to look like my mother. I wanted to do everything like my mother. I just thought she was so beautiful, and I wanted to be just like her. So, I think that there are so many things I remember, but then there's so many things that I remember through my mother and what she showed me. So that's how I'm able to do that. The other thing is that also I talked to a lot of people who are Indian, who were alive during that period, before independence, during independence, after independence. And a major force in my life is my dad. My dad's 93, and you can ask him anything about all of those eras, and he will tell you. He is so sharp and so clear. And he will tell you what was happening politically, economically, emotionally, morally. He knows all of those kinds of things. So it's fun to talk to him. And then he's always sending me TED Talk videos and, archival footage and things like that. So all of that comes in handy. And it helps me flush out what that whole time period would have been like.
Yeah. The next couple questions actually are also about research for the book. But the first one is from Maria Christic. And Maria says, how did you research perfume manufacturing practices in India specifically? Did you travel to Kannauj as well? And Maria also says, I loved reading your books in ebook as well as and also thoroughly enjoyed the audiobooks. I appreciate you portraying India in such a positive way when there's so much incomplete and inaccurate information out there about it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that comment, Maria, because that has always been one of my aims. When I was a kid coming to the United States for the first time, I had all these questions lobbed at me that I didn't understand. So people would say, why are you so poor in India? Why do you let cows roam the streets? Your mother has a dot on her forehead. Does that hurt her? And then, when we would say we were Indian, people would just say, what tribe? And I didn't know what any of this stuff was. I didn't know, and then of course, when you say you're Indian, then they do the little feather thing in the back and, it was just awful. So what I remember feeling is that I was embarrassed to be Indian. I was ashamed that we came from some poor country. I didn't even realize that India was considered underdeveloped and a third world country. Even our textbooks only have pictures of poverty in India, only. That's it, nothing else. And so I think for a long time, I just thought, I'm just going to be American, because if I'm American, I'm safe. Nobody will make fun of me if I'm American. And I think it's taken me decades and decades and decades. And really, when I started writing these books about India and doing all the research, that I realized why India was a poor country when we came here in 1967, why the impression of Americans was so negative. And that was because India was such a rich country before the colonizers came. So, 300 years ago, the colonizers came and saw, oh my gosh, this country has everything. They have jewels, they have spices, they have tea, they have gold, they have essential oils, they have everything that is so rich that we don't have. Why don't we just settle in like parasites and try to grab everything we can? And then by the time they had gobbled up everything that was good about India, they left, and they left it in tatters. And so India had to do this amazing job of rebuilding themselves since independence in 1947. And I think in those intervening 70 years, they've done an amazing job at building the industries that the British destroyed. Textile industry, shipbuilding industry, and steel industry. So those are three industries that the British destroyed. They had used everything up, and then they tore everything down so Indians could not just go back to work. There were tens of millions of Indians out of work when the British left in 1947, and that is due to the British, not to the Indians. So once I understood all of that, I thought, these fictional books are my opportunity to sort of right some of the wrongs that have been promoted about India. And so I think with each book, really what I'm trying to say is, here's yet another fabulous contribution India has made to the beauty of this world, to the world's existence. So for example, in the Perfumist of Paris, here's what I found. The majority of ingredients that go into perfumes are mined in India and the Indian subcontinent. And that is worth everybody knowing about it, because I think for so long, France has just taken the credit, right? Oh, yes, we're the ones who create perfume. But essential oils have been made in India for centuries, for thousands of years. The East has used essential oils. The Mid-East has used essential oils to perfume themselves and their bodies. The only reason that the Europeans use perfume is because they refused to bathe. They thought that bathing was harmful to the body, and they needed all of these perfumes that they were making with ingredients from India, because they needed to hide their sweat smell and just all of these kinds of things. Now, in India, bathing ritual has been a major part of daily living forever, as it is in China, as it is in the Mideast. Bathing rituals are very, very important. So anyway, with every book, I do try to talk about another contribution. In The Henna Artist, it was all about the herbal remedies and the spices that we are just now here in the United States cottoning on to, like those turmeric lattes, those golden lattes that you have at Starbucks. You know what? Turmeric has been around in India forever. And my mother used to use it to, when we would get hurt, fall off our bicycle and get hurt, she would put a poultice of coconut oil and turmeric on our hurt. And it, totally heals itself. It's just amazing. So, and then I think in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, I wanted to talk about the gold in India and the jewels and, that jewel in the crown of the queen. I want that back. The Kohinoor diamond. I want that back for India. Thank you so much for your question.
Yeah. Let's see. So Priscilla Skillman asks, for this book, for The Perfumist of Paris, how long did all this research take? And then how long did it take you to write the first draft?
That's an interesting idea. I don't really, I think the first draft takes the longest because that's where the story is building and coming together. So it probably took me a year to write the first draft. And then I did 8 more drafts before I turned it in. One of the things I did in my research that's kind of interesting is that I stayed in Paris at an apartment that I specifically picked out on Airbnb because it seemed like the kind of apartment that Radha and Pierre would live in. So find it on Airbnb. It has a Le Corbusier furniture that I wanted them to have, and the hardwood floors and the beam on the ceiling and everything. So I go to Paris, and then for 2 weeks, what I did was I would leave the apartment and go to maybe a croissant place that Radha would go to get her croissants every morning. I clocked how far it was from her apartment to where the kids go to school. So that if she had to walk them there, what would that look like? And then what would it look like from the apartment to the Jardin de Luxembourg? And, what would you see at various times of the day there? So that's kind of part of the research that I was doing. I really like to immerse my readers in the scenes of the books. So I want you to feel that you're actually there in the Jardin de Luxembourg, that you're actually seeing that Japanese couple over there taking photographs, and that you're actually seeing this little boy, launching his boat in the main waterfall there. I want you to see all of that and experience it. So I have to immerse myself before I can put it on the page. Did that answer the question? Or did I just go off on a tangent?
No, definitely. And then the next one is from Aisha, who asked a similar question about the writing process. But Aisha's asking, what are some of the challenges that you'll face while writing the book and also while publishing it?
I have a very fabulous agent. I have a fabulous publishing team, and they are completely behind me. So I have never had anybody on my team say to me, you cannot write about this, or we want you to change that so it'll be more culturally appropriate or morally appropriate or whatever. They just want to see the best story. And they want characters with very strong voices. So characters that start to feel to readers like real people. And that's what I deliver. So I don't really have a lot of challenges. I think as long as I do my research, I'm really happy with how everything turns out, because my research is always worth it. It's always worth doing the research. By the way, my publisher does not pay for my research. So I'm the one who's financing all of that. Now I am on to book number 4, everybody. It's not part of the trilogy, but guess what? I have to go in May. I'm going to Europe again, because this one will take place in New Delhi, and it will take place in Prague and Florence and Paris. So, so I have to go. I have to go do this research. Currently, I'm on a book tour for the Perfumist of Paris. I think we're halfway through that right now. But as soon as this is over, we are getting on that plane and going there. But I also have all of this stuff lined up. I have professors I'm speaking to who are, experts in the culture of that area in 1937. That's the time period of my book. So if anybody wants to know, how do I know what happened in 1937? Here you go. I'm going to be talking to a lot of people who are experts in history, culture, music, social fabric of society from those eras. And I'm also meeting with archivists. So I'm looking through all these archives of photos from that era. I'm listening to music of that era. I'm going to be looking at the art that's coming out of that era. So that's how we do it.
And I think we have time for one last question. And this is a fun one to end on. This is also from Aisha B, who asks, as an aspiring writer, you are an inspiration to me. Do you have any advice for young writers?
Yes. First of all, do a lot of reading. Read. And I think that reading the classics is a very good idea. So I read, as a kid, I read a lot of Dickens. I read a lot of Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters. The English literature of that period, I think, was really good at capturing characters. They're really strong on character voices. And they're really good at plot. Like you can follow what it is to be a main character and have conflict, and then resolution. So they're really good at building up on that. And then, of course, read all of the fabulous things, like the 10 best books of every year. Read those, and you will find why they are the 10 best books. You will find why they are so strong. And then after a while, you'll be able to say, you know what, that may have been a really popular book of that decade, but I don't like it as much because of these reasons. You'll be able to be very critical in a good way of the work that you are reading. And then I think also my last inspiration for you is you have to remember the 3 P's, as I call them. One is passion. Write about something you're really passionate about. Don't write about something just because everybody else is writing about them. Like, okay, vampires. Okay, I'm going to write about vampires. Write about something because you're passionate about it. It's important to you. The second P is persistence. You have to persist. People are going to say, I need you to change this, or have you thought about it going this way? Or, you know what, this is just not working. Can you strengthen this in some way? You must persist. You must keep working at it. And the last thing is patience. Have patience with yourself, because there are times when you're not going to want to write. There are times when you're going to say, I can't do this. I can't do this, but you can. Just step away, just change your activity, do something else. And then, it'll be easy peasy when you get back to it. So just remember, and also writing is revision. It is a lot of revision. It's not, your first draft is not cutting it. Your second draft is not cutting it. By the time you're at your 10th draft, maybe you're getting there.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Alka, for answering so many questions today. And thank you to our audience also for joining us tonight. Your patronage is what enables us to bring you programming like this regularly, and we can't continue to host these types of events without the book sales to support them. So of course, please support Alka and PNP by using the link that we've posted in the chat to purchase The Perfumist of Paris. You need to know how the trilogy ends, so get your books. And you need to be caught up for the next one, even though it's not part of the trilogy. You got to have everything, checked off your list. And then be sure to check our website for the most current updated listings. We have a great list of events to choose from, and we hope to see you at them, whether they're virtual or in person. And so we hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you so much, Alka, for being here and for taking time out of your day to join us. I hope the rest of the book tour goes well. I hope you have lots more bright, fun jackets to wear for your Zoom calls.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, this has been really fun. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for asking such good questions.
Yes. Oh my God. They were such great questions. So thank you, everyone. And have a great night.
All right.